What's up, chums? Sharky here, and welcome back to the Shark Bites podcast. It has been a hot minute since I made one of these. A couple years ago, I made a video called My Worst 2 Jobs Ever, and it was a story time type video. And in the video, I briefly talked about how my first job that I ever had working at a cafe, I was basically discriminated against for having ADHD, and I go into like how I was treated, and I wanted to talk about another job that was probably one of the hardest, if not the hardest job that I've ever had. And I wanted to wait to make this video because even though I don't work there anymore, I had a family member who was working for them, and I wanted to wait until they no longer worked there. After I had graduated college, I moved back in with my parents, and I started looking for a part-time job. I wanted a full-time, but things were kind of rough at the time, and I found a job at a nursing home as an activity aide. I worked there for 6 months, but it honestly felt like longer. So obviously there's some things that I'm not allowed to talk about that is confidential, but I'm gonna try and illustrate my experience at this job as much as I can. This job wasn't all bad. It definitely was difficult and challenging, but it had some good moments that were really positive and a learning experience for me. I worked with a lot of residents that were over the age of 80. I would say one of the biggest problems at the place that I worked at, and maybe it wasn't like this at all the locations, but at mine, they seemed to be insanely understaffed because it always seemed like when you needed somebody, it was hard to find someone to help you. So even though I was part-time, I did work mostly by myself in activities. So my job would involve bringing the residents, who most of them were in wheelchairs or had walkers. Most of my job involved bringing them down to the activity and then setting up the activity. But you would basically have 6 to 10 residents, depending on what activity it was, that you had to basically assume all responsibility for, which I'll get more into that in a second. Some of the residents have severe disabilities, or they have a tendency to get out of their chair, or sometimes they fight other residents. If you've ever worked in a nursing home or a similar healthcare type facility with elderly, you know what I'm talking about. It was really risky to have that many people in the same room, because sometimes, especially for bingo and stuff, I would have 10 people at all these different tables, and I was responsible for the entire room. There was no other staff in there with me. And the nurses would bring residents in and then just walk off, just leave them and walk off. And I understand, nursing is insanely hard, and sometimes you need a break. And I know that nurses can't be everywhere at once, and it's a very stressful job, and I respect that. But I wasn't medically responsible for any of the residents. There were things that they needed that I could not administer, or things that I couldn't do. If they fell, I wasn't allowed to help them up because it's a liability thing. They have to have a medical professional help them up, and they had machines to do that and everything. But it was very high stress environment because there were not enough staff. And I thought it would have been better to have at least 2 activity aides, or maybe 1 nurse and an activity aide managing the residents for each activity. But usually it was just me, and we did have incidents where a resident would be trying to get up out of their chair and walk around, which they're not really allowed to do because it's a fall risk. And someone did fall. They were not severely injured, but they did bump their head, and it was we had to have an ambulance come and stuff. So it was kind of well, not kind of, it was scary because I turn my back for like 1 second, and somebody falls. But I feel like that's a problem with a lot of nursing homes is like there's just not enough staff. And it is a hard job, and it takes a special kind of person that's, strong enough to handle the demands of a job like that. And I felt it for sure. Like, even working part-time, I felt like I worked full-time there because honestly, I kind of felt like my hours were not exactly what they were supposed to be, which I'll talk more about that in a second. But another thing, going off of that, the stressful environment part, a lot of the residents were very rude to me, and they would like mess with me where they would like ask me to do things and then I would do it, and then they would like mess it up again and ask me to like, almost like they were just messing with me, like making me work harder for no reason, like, or just for enjoyment, which was really like hurtful. I had a resident who was kind of known for being rude, but she had dementia, so I tried to like let it go. But she would call me a derogatory name that I'm not going to repeat in this podcast, but it starts with a B. I'm not going to lie, there were nights where I would go home crying in my car because just being in a high-stress environment with low staff and not getting help that you need with a bunch of people, I mean, emotionally, it's really tough because you try to be helpful and you try to do your job to the best of your ability, but like you're just one person, and it's hard when you feel like you're trying your best and nobody really appreciates you or like acknowledges that you are trying, I guess. I did have some residents that I liked to talk to a lot. This woman who was a Christian like me, and we would talk a lot. She actually would always comment that she thought my tattoos were pretty, and she liked to go to church a lot and would ask me, what we were doing at church. And I had this couple, her husband was in the nursing home and she would come visit him, and they were super sweet, very nice people, and I loved talking to them just about, if it was the holidays or just like what's going on in their everyday life. But they were a super sweet couple and were always really nice to me and said like thank you and were very appreciative of everything. And that helped a lot because there were some days where, I mean, you really just wanted to like go downstairs and hide, Very stressful for me. I don't like to think of myself as a people pleaser, but like when people tell me that like I'm not good enough, I'm kind of emotional. Like I don't like to hear stuff like that. I mean, if it's constructive criticism, yeah, but if you're just like being mean just to be mean, like that's harder for me to take, I feel. But like I said, there were nights where I just wanted to straight up ghost and quit, but I felt kind of like I couldn't because I did have like another family member that was working there, and like I was just trying to, like be a good employee. And I wanted to talk about like expectation. So like when you are a part-time activity aide, like your main job is just to do the activities with the residents and like set it up, help them, bring them, over to the activity and do it with them. But I kind of felt like the other two employees that were activity aides that worked there, one of them was in her 70s, and honestly, I wondered like why she was even working there because she was almost as old as some of the residents there. And I'm not trying to hate on her. I'm just saying like she wasn't physically able to do as much of her job as me and the other employee. So I kind of felt like it wasn't really fair because she would just kind of make us do her job because she wasn't physically able to. And she would only work like, I don't even remember. Her hours were like extremely low. Like we were all part-time, but like she was low. I think she only worked like 15 hours a week, and I was working like 30, I think, which is still part-time, but I mean, it's getting very close to full-time, because I want to say full-time is 38 hours. Correct me in the comments, but I'm pretty sure full-time is 38 or more hours. So I was working like 30 to 32, I think, and she was only working like 15, and then the third person, hers was even lower. She was only working like 10 hours a week. And it just felt like our responsibility was like not evenly divided, even though we all had the same job description. And they would just say like, "Oh, I think you can handle that," and then just like leave. Like they would make me do stuff for them all the time, and it was just really annoying. 'Cause I was the youngest out of all of us, and they're like, "Oh, you have energy, right?" I'm like, "Well, I need a break sometimes." And yeah, it was just rough. Like I felt like I never really got a chance to sit down, 'cause like, I was always on my feet. I had a lot of back issues from standing all day, and my feet, I messed up my feet at that job too. Like I had to get inserts and like better shoes, because just, running around the nursing home all day and standing for long periods of time was just super rough. But it was weird. Like, I just felt like they expected me to do everything, and like they would kind of just like hand me the stuff to do the activities and then just like go off and do something else that's like less work related, I guess. Like they would just go read with a resident or something. I'm like, why can't I do that? Like I'm running around trying to get bowling set up, and you get to just sit and read with a resident. Like that's not fair. But anyway, so last thing I'm going to talk about before I talk about some of the good things. I did actually, I think one of the hardest things was you get to know the residents, and then unfortunately, like, deaths do happen and people get sick, and you can kind of see like the deterioration as they get older. Like there was the resident that I was talking about earlier, where his wife would come and visit him a lot, and they were really sweet. Unfortunately, like he got really just bad, like near the end of my employment there. Like when I first met him, he was really energetic and like cracking jokes and just more lively, I guess. But as, the months went on, he started to just get like really bad shakes, and you could visibly see that he just wasn't doing as well. He kind of stopped going to activities as much, which was kind of sad because I really liked him. He was still there when I left, so I don't know if he's still there or not, but there was another resident that who is also a Christian that I used to talk to at the church activities, because we would like have Bible study groups, and he would always come. But he was a super nice guy. He was like kind of heavy set and was in a motorized chair, and he really didn't go to a lot of the activities because like getting him out of the bed and like I guess ready to go took such a long time that he didn't bother to come very often. But he was super nice, and unfortunately he passed away while I was working there, and it was really hard on a lot of people because a lot of the residents and staff really liked him. I mean, I'm glad he was a Christian. Yeah, he passed away while I was there, and it was a weird experience for me because I don't think a lot of people, unless you've had like a family member pass, you don't really experience that on a regular basis. Like somebody that you just talked to like a couple weeks ago is no longer there. It's hard because like, you're an employee, so like you're not that close to them. But, like, you feel sad, you feel bad, obviously, but, like, just not having them there anymore is kind of surreal, I guess. I definitely learned a lot from the residents when I was there. Like, yeah, it was stressful. I was very emotional when, residents were being rude, or like bingo was too crazy for me to handle, which honestly, I had a mental breakdown once or twice just from bingo, which I know sounds ridiculous. Like, oh, it's just bingo. Like, it's a game. It doesn't matter. But, like, I guess, like, people took it so seriously that they would, like, fight each other over it. Like, you wouldn't think that that was possible, but apparently, like, they had just gotten so used to that. And, like, the nurses would mess with me sometimes. Like, they would take stuff off the prize cart for bingo and, like, take candy. Or we had, like, Beanie Babies and stuff for the residents if they won bingo, and they would just, like, take stuff off the cart. I'm like, that's not for you. But the nurses were, like, no help. Like, anytime you needed them, they were always, like, downstairs in the break room or something. Not very reliable. It was just a pain. Like, it would make things so much harder because they just weren't around. I remember this one resident, first time I met her, she had, like, severe dementia, so, like, she really didn't know what she was talking about half the time. But I remember, like, one of the first times that I had met her, she leaned over to me and she was like, "Is somebody trying to run you out of town?" And I was like, "No, I don't think so." And she was like, "Oh, well, it'll be okay." And I was just like, what? So you get little things like that happening, which is kind of creepy, but I guess also kind of funny. I had some good talks with the residents just about, like, quite a few of them were Christians or Catholic, and we would talk about different faiths and just stuff that we've learned in life, and, just how different things are now to when, they were my age, and they would ask me questions about stuff, and I would ask them questions about when they grew up, and because I do have a genuine interest. Like, I feel bad when, people always say, like, oh, old people, they just ramble about the old days all the time. Well, sometimes it's actually interesting. Like, this one guy, he was a little forgetful, and I think maybe onset dementia, but he was very nice, and he would talk to me about something about the Panama Canal. Like, he would always be talking about somewhere he went, or something he did. And it was interesting, So those were just kind of like some of the good things that I experienced. I can't describe in words, like, how mentally scarring that job was for me. I'm kind of a sensitive, emotional person, and honestly, I had nightmares after I left that job, just about, like, when things would get stressful and the residents would be, like, being mean to me and stuff. I know that sounds, like, really goofy, or like, oh, like, they don't know what they're saying, it's not a big deal. But honestly, to me, it was just really hard to deal with that because, I gave that job my all, and I feel like people really did not respect that all the time. And it really got to me, and just like even to this day, every once in a while, I still have nightmares about it, just about working there. And let's just say that there were some times where it would really feel like an asylum, like back in the old days. Like, as much as, like, it sounds silly when I say it out loud, it was honestly kind of a traumatizing job for me. I can't say that I would want to work with elderly again doing that, just because I don't think I'm mentally well enough to handle that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Have you ever had a job like that where, like, it just really put you off from working in that field, or you had mental trauma from working there? I'm really interested to see what you have to say. And thanks for listening to me talk about my past experiences. I was gonna make this like a fursuit video, but it's not really in line with what I've been putting on the channel lately, so I decided to make it a podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.